Patch 11.10 drastically shifted the jungle meta, and with such big shifts, meta routes and playstyles tend to adapt as well. We at SkillCapped painstakingly went through the top 50 players of the Korean Challenger ladder and went through all of their games in the recent patch to find out what kind of routes they were preferring, and key patterns now that catch-up XP and camp respawns have changed have been identified. For a great example of why this is so important now, let's just show a side-by-side of a game on the recent patch. The map gets split, and one jungler full clears. The other does significantly less camps and ends up being 3 camps behind after the first recall. On any previous patch, this would pretty much spell doom, as you're now a full level behind with very little way to catch back up. However, with changes to spawn timers, Rumble now just doesn't have anything to do. Even though he's massively ahead, none of his bot side camps are up, and this is the time that Kindred can start to get back into the game. He wanders around for a full minute and isn't able to achieve much. Lo and behold, Kindred is now at even level with Rumble, even being down tons of camps. Catch-up XP just means that they're even level now, and obviously this doesn't look too good for our full clearing friend here. Kindred goes on to dominate the rest of the game, and even ends being down 20 CS, and still up 2 levels. So it's quite obvious from this that the old school plan of getting ahead through camps just doesn't really work anymore. There's a lot more focus on ganks and snowballing the game in other ways. The top Korean players have been using 3 main routes that we'll be teaching you today. But before we do, you should know where this guide comes from, our hyper improvement system at SkillCapped.com. We have professional courses by the top players, brand new Smurf commentaries each week where a challenger player walks you through how to climb out of every rank from Iron to Diamond, elite coaching from trained experts, and we upload tons of new exclusive guides you can only find on our website each week. In fact, we're so confident you'll improve using our system that if you don't climb at least 5 divisions while actively using SkillCapped, you can claim a full refund. So there's no risk. What are you waiting for? Check out SkillCapped.com and get the rank you've always wanted. Link in the description below. The first thing you need to know is how a jungle route is defined. We could easily say that full clearing or doing 5 camps is a jungle path, but there's one main issue with this. It stops you from having to think. There will be games where full clearing is the best option available, or where going red straight to top immediately is the best. It all depends on the map state, and learning to read that is what's super important. There are no cookie cutter best jungle routes. Imagine if you were playing chess and set out with the first 6 moves pre-planned. You'll be checkmated. Not thinking about what the enemy is doing or reacting to it at all is extremely dangerous. The best players will change their pathing based on enemy moves. Routes that we'll be discussing today involve a couple of camps, and then the adaptations and variations that you can make afterwards. Flexibility is way more important now than ever due to the champs that are being played. When everyone is full clearing, it becomes a bit less risky to not pay attention. But now there's a lot more thought that needs to go into your decisions, and that's what we'll be getting at today. Our first route is simply red to Raptors, but there are a ton of really cool adaptations that happen after this. After this opening, you need to scan the map and look to see how fast ganks will become available. The worst feeling when jungling is just sitting in a bush for 40 seconds. To be time efficient, we want to line up our gank with the ending of a camp. So once Lee Sin finishes Raptors, he needs to figure out what adaptations to make, of which there are a couple of options. If he immediately sees that a gank is highly likely, and just wants to get level 3 and go, going to Gromp from Raptors is the new best way of getting level 3 as fast as possible. Previously, players would do red-blue Gromp. However, with longer respawn timers, it's now more important than ever to take smaller camps off of the map. If you don't, there will be just way too much downtime before your camps respawn, and you'll be left with nothing to do. Additionally, you'll leave Raptors up for someone to come and take it if you make a play on the other side of the map. What's really nice about this route is that you have about 7 seconds to scan the map and think here, as you don't have to decide what to do until getting to this point here. You can opt into the Gromp route that we just mentioned, or just do your wolves and wait for some more time to gather information. Again, it's important to just read the map and see what looks good. Lee Sin decides that available ganks aren't likely yet and opts into wolves. After finishing them, he needs to scan the map again and decide on his next step. Here's where a major change has occurred. Players are now doing Gromp before they're blue. Lee Sin does this in our example, and this has a few major benefits. 1, you cycle a lot of your minor camps, leaving only Krugs up, and you do them all in a nice line. If you stop to do blue first, the next time you clear, there will be around 10 to 15 seconds when you're sitting here waiting for your Gromp to come up. If ganks look extremely unlikely here, you can just pivot into your blue after Gromp, and then go to Crab. However, if you want to be on map a bit faster, going to a gank right away definitely works. Lee Sin has practically zero downtime when looking for this play, and unfortunately it gets countered by the enemy Kindred. However, we just want to highlight that the timing at which he made this happen and the amount of camps he did made it extremely efficient, even if it didn't work out. We'll get back to how Kindred managed this counter gank when we talk about another route later. The fact that you can pivot at 2 different places, one after your Raptors and again after Wolves, makes this path one of the most flexible and aggressive routes. If you want to gank early, Red Raptors is a great start. Let's showcase one more example of this before we move on. Kindred uses the Red Raptors route, and seeing that no ganks are immediately available, opts to go for the slower Wolves clear instead of Gromp. After Wolves, she pivots again and goes for 5 camps instead of 4. Note that it is okay to do blue before Gromp, but only if you're going to do them together. From this position, Kindred is free to gank bot, mid, or go for crab, and the timing all lines up really well. Kindred opts for a bot gank in this game, and once again the enemy jungler shows up to a skirmish. Don't worry, we'll talk about how and why this happens when we get to our other sections, but know that this is just a good play from both junglers to be here at this time. It just happens to work out in Viego's favor. Our next route is also a red start, but this time you'll be going to do red Krugs and then Raptors. Take note that in all the games we've watched, these 3 were always done together if Krugs was touched at all. Overall, this is better for champions with good AoE and fast clears. If there's a chance you'll have to end up full clearing, then you'll be able to do it before Crab spawns. But we still have a lot of adaptations to make after Raptors once again. This game is a Taliyah vs Viego matchup. Taliyah doesn't get information on Viego at level 1, since both the enemy bot and top lanes are in lane not leashing. So she has to assume the worst and account for Viego pathing both towards top as well as bottom in order to not get caught off guard. Because of this, she makes a really great adaptation. If you're pathing into the same side as the enemy jungler, or simply just don't know where they are, going to blue and Gromp while skipping Wolves is amazing. The old 5 camp route was usually Wolves into blue and then Crab. However, doing this route gives you extra experience and gold, as Gromp is just worth more than Wolves. Once again, you'll see Taliyah doing blue before Gromp, but only because her Qs hit both at the end, and this is a slight optimization for her clear. From this position, Taliyah is able to either go to the top side crab or make a pivot, pathing down towards Wolves to do them and then go for bottom crab. This has a few different benefits. If you're doing a standard full clear, the enemy jungler would be able to invade you on your Gromp at this time. Wolves are located much closer to mid lane and give you a shorter route to safety. They're just harder for the enemy jungler to mess with you on and requires them to go out of their way to do so. Additionally, you're just closer to the middle of the map, making it easier to pivot to one side or the other and decide on what crab you want to get as late as possible. If you path the normal way, doing a full clear, you're really far away from the opposite side crab, and it's hard to want to path all the way back to go grab it. This new 5 camp clear is great for junglers that can't full clear and meet the 3:15 timer for scuttles. And an additional benefit is that you can make another pivot right after finishing Raptors to just go gank, or do something on the map if you wanted to. Having 2 spots to pivot in make this route extremely flexible, just like the red to Raptors route, but it's a bit more defensive and slower to get on the map. So if your champion isn't as strong a skirmisher at level 3, or you just aren't likely to find a gank, this is going to be better for you than red to Raptors. At the first pivot location after Raptors, a fairly common scenario will be to just full clear. Just because full clears don't get you as ahead as before just by blazing through camps, it doesn't mean that they aren't viable. In our next example, we've got a Lee Sin into Olaf. A lot of players don't know that you can actually meet the 3:15 timer on Lee with a bit of optimization and by taking E earlier than normal. Because of this, it becomes viable to actually just full clear. Right as he gets to his Wolves, top is already dead, so the need to be on map quickly is non-existent, and Lee can take this opportunity to clean out all of his camps. This is a decision that is made at the first pivot location, not at the start of the game. We just want to reiterate that these players are always adapting, and that in this case the full clear is the adaptation, not the default. Notice once again that he does blue and Gromp together, and this is something that you'll be seeing a lot from high level players. Full clears are good in a couple of different situations, but in almost all cases you need to be able to meet the 3:15 mark if you're going to do it. An exception is when you're pathing opposite side of the other jungler and there aren't any available ganks. So even if your champion is slow to clear, it won't matter if the enemy jungler is on the other side of the map. An additional pivot that we should note is right after Raptors. If a same side gank looks good, you can definitely go for it, although it is much better if the enemy jungler is pathing towards the side that you want to gank, as you won't risk giving up your entire opposite side to counter jungling. This 3 camp to gank route is usually better than blue Gromp red, since you cycle more of your minor camps, and in this patch that becomes pretty important. There are obviously a ton of factors to think about and a lot of pivots that you can make during the game, but you'll rarely see people deviate from either before Raptors. Again, it's possible that they do, but in 99% of the games that we looked at, if the jungler started at red, they either did red 2 Raptors and then adapted, or did red Krugs Raptors and carried on from there. So that was 2 of the 3 routes, and that leaves us with just 1 more. Blue into Gromp and Wolves. You may be wondering why there is not a 4th route in this video, but that's just because doing blue Gromp and leaving the quadrant really isn't seen anymore. Because you only cycle your Gromp, your second rotation of camps will be low value, and its extremely high risk is just not something most top Korean players are willing to take. You can do blue Gromp Wolves and gank the same side, similar to the route from before, but starting at red. However, you'll lack red buff, so the gank isn't as likely to work out. If you're planning on going top in 3 camps on blue side, for example, you should just do the red Raptors Gromp we talked about earlier. Obviously, there are going to be times where the unexpected happen and you need to do it, but like we said, it's rare, and you just need to read the map. We didn't see it a single time in our research, but that doesn't mean that it doesn't exist, it's just not meta at the moment. The most common route starting at blue explains exactly how our first 2 junglers got their ganks countered. Like we mentioned earlier, every jungler clears out the entire blue side before exiting to the other side of the map, and then does one of 3 pivots. The first is doing a 4 camp into a gank or counter gank. This is the most aggressive route, and the one that players use when they're expecting a gank to work or wanting to counter one. Kindred looks at the map right before getting Raptors and sees that her bot lane is slow stacking waves into the turret. Seeing this, she makes a great prediction that Lee will try to gank on this timer, and because of it, skips her Raptors and wants to get red buff and get on the map as soon as possible. This is a perfect example of how reading the map and adapting leads to great outcomes. In the Viego vs Kindred game, Viego does the exact same thing. He reads the map, predicts that his bot lane will be especially volatile after the wave bounces, and shows up right as they start fighting, turning the game in his favor. Of course, there are a couple of other variations on this route. The next is a simple 5 camp. After reading the map before his Raptors, Lee decides that it's unlikely for anything to happen while he's doing his camps, and opts to instead fight for Crab instead of looking for a gank. Starting on blue buff, Lee Sin's clear is a bit slower, so he only has time to do 5 camps before he needs to be on Crab on time. Again, if you can't full clear by the 315 mark, a full clear is off limits unless you know that the enemy jungler is pathing into the opposite side. This allows him to secure double scuttle and get a large lead over Nidalee right off the bat. Last but not least, we've got the full clear, which really didn't occur that much starting at blue. Most likely because blue buff starts tend to be slower for a lot of champions. However, if you don't have any ganks and the enemy jungler is on the opposite side, then there's no reason to just not clean out your jungle. The blue start adaptations definitely aren't as cool and exciting as the red start ones, but they're important to know nonetheless. And that brings us to the end of the 3rd and final route. Remember that these were just the most common ones that we saw while analyzing Korean solo queue. At the end of the day, you really have to just think and account for enemy possibilities. Adapting on the fly will always give you the best results instead of looking for copy-paste solutions. If you want to improve fast and get the rank you've always wanted, then check out SkillCapped.com, link in the description below. Otherwise, you know the deal. Make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon to keep up with the meta and get more premium guides with one goal in mind, helping you become the better player. We here at SkillCapped want to thank you for watching, and we'll catch you in the next one.